Well, good evening, world, and welcome once again to the Changing Consciousness show on Friday, the 9th of November, with your host, the Boxing Vicar, broadcasting from Gemerschein in Germany. I thought I was going to be on my own tonight, but just having walked through the door is Ruth, and she's been singing in town.
Well, Brian, yes, that's one way of putting it. Singing in town sounds a bit less than it actually was. What it was had to do with revolution in a sense, because I kept revolving from one place to the next. Tonight is the 9th of November, and in Ghana time, this is the night of the arts, which means that the doors of all the museums are open. Everybody who thinks he can do something cultural keeps their doors open. So there will be live performances all around the town, in the churches, in the town hall, in the festival hall. Shops will be open. There are stores in the street. The whole town is going from one place to the next. And I was performing with the church choir in the church, 2 performances at 8 and at 9, 20 minutes each. We did pieces mostly from the Baroque period, and I tell you, the church was more full than it was on a normal Sunday. And in between, I had about 3/4 of an hour, so I popped across the road to the old cinema where the drama group Gemerschein, where I'm also a member, had a live performance on stage with some guests and music. And I just got there and somebody said, would you like to do a poem? And I said, give me the mic, jumped up on stage, did my poem, couldn't see a thing because all the lights were in my face in a true artist fashion. Put the microphone down, went back to the church, did the other performance, and came back. So back to something more serious, though I promise it won't get too heavy.
Well, sometimes what we're going to talk about is serious, but we also have to have some fun in life and always look on the bright side of life. After the show, I'm going to join Ruth. I'm going to take my baran and hopefully go into the town and maybe play in a group till about 2 o'clock in the morning. Who knows? But now, tonight our thoughts turn to the meaning of revolution. Why it happens, how do we deal with it when it takes place? But first of all, what does the word revolution mean? Well, I've looked it up, and it's from the Latin. Revelatu, revolution, means a turnaround. It's a fundamental change of power or organizational structures that take place over relatively short periods of time. Although they take place over a short period of time, it takes a long time to build up. And mostly it's used to refer to political change. Aristotle described this many thousands of years ago, 2,000, 3,000. He said there were 2 types of revolutions. One was a complete turnaround, a complete change from one constitution to another. The second is to tweak it up, modification, modify an existing constitution. So I suppose that means we can either have a complete change of an ideology, but no one so far has been able to come up with an ideology that will satisfy every individual need for freedom and liberty on equal grounds. So maybe our next choice is to modify the best ideology we seem to have for now, and that is democracy, and find ways to tweak it till it becomes pure as it can. And the purest sense of democracy comes from the Greek language, meaning rule by the people. And we will come back to that, but let's have some music.
You're listening to Critical Mass Radio. Now it's our turn.
Well, I expect you've guessed by now that that music came from Les Miserables. And I've only seen it as a school play, as a senior school play, and that was beautiful. So I hope one day I will go and see the actual stage version of that. Revolutions have occurred throughout human history and vary widely in terms of methods, duration, and motivating ideology. The term ideology was born in the highly controversial philosophical and political debates and fights of the French Revolution. Ideologies are systems of abstract thought applied to public matters, and thus makes this concept central to politics. Every political or economical structure entails an ideology, whether or not it is explicit and meaningful to all people. Political ideologies have two dimensions. First of all, you have to have a goal. We all have to have a goal in life. We all have to have a purpose. And if we have a goal, then the next thing we have to do is to set out the method of achieving that goal. And that's what political ideologies give us, these two dimensions.
Their results include major changes in culture, economy, and social political institutions. There are some changes that have come out of ideologies that have not only affected the Western world, but they have had global repercussions, and these repercussions continue into the 21st century. And not surprisingly, maybe, the first one is the Magna Carta, England's great charter for change, happened in 1215, and it was the first time that the authority of the king was challenged. It wasn't challenged by the people at large, it was challenged by the aristocracy, by the barons, but it was challenged, and they forced the king to become a subject to the rule of law. And this law protected the people, or a fair few, but at least some, from feudal abuse. This was then continued in time and followed by the glorious revolution in 1633 to 1721. But as I said, it was not a revolution by the people of England, just by a group of aristocrats and barons who demanded rights. But they limited the power of the king, and that was a thing that must have been unheard of in that day and age. It was a revolution organized by those that were then the upper class, the ruling class. However, I really think it's momentous because the fact that a king's right could be successfully challenged was the first but major step forward towards a global change, although it has taken many hundreds of years to reach its new level of seeking change in the 21st century. Anyhow, the Glorious Revolution put an end to the absolute monarchy in England, whereas in France and other parts of the continent it continued to thrive. Well, the opponents of the Stuarts won, and one outcome of that was that it permanently ended any chance of Catholics becoming really established in England, and for British Catholics, the effects were simply disastrous, both politically and socially, because they were denied the right to vote, and they were denied the right to sit in the Westminster Parliament for over a century. So they were practically pushed to the fringes of society.
I wonder if you've ever asked yourself the question, who am I? You know, I was about 30 when I did that. Who am I? And that's when I started doing some meditation and things like that, and had an out-of-body experience. It changed my life because I left from being an engineer to go into theological college, and it's quite devastating when you really trying to find out who you are, because in that process of meditation, I'm legion. I'm not a single person. I'm so many different personalities. And all of us are. We're a complex of personalities. You know, you're a child, you're an adult, teenager, you're a lover, mother, father, grandfather, grandmother, work person. We're so many different characters, and we put so many different faces on. So I suppose we all ask that question at some stage of our life: who am I? Who am I? And sometimes we manage to get a glimpse of an answer. But when we do, we can either turn and hide or take courage of consequences of our discovery. The French Revolution, perhaps one of the most brutal, 1789, 1799, used the ideas adopted from the Magna Carta as the basis for their ideology of liberty and freedom. So I suppose England has got some little claim here as being a group that have led up to modern change. Then when the first rumors of political change in France reached American shores in 1789, the Americans hoped the existing Franco-American alliance would be solidified by democratic reforms that would transform France into a republican ally against the aristocratic and the monarchical Britain system. However, with revolution often comes change, it also comes political instability. Nothing takes place in a smooth way. Life isn't like that. Violence, deaths, and calls for radical social change. And that's what happened in France. And it frightened many Americans. They had to think twice. But it also produced new ideas which became responsible for reinforcing the political differences between which were within President George Washington's cabinet. And it divided it into factions. There was the Democratic Republicans, led by the then Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson. He sympathized revolutionaries. On the other hand, there was the Federalists, led by Secretary of the Secretary and Treasurer Alexander Hamilton. He believed that ties with Great Britain were more important and should be upheld. In a democracy, every individual should be able to have a say in one way or another in everything that affects their lives. It's a big task, that. So we're going to listen to some music talking about revolution. Tracy Chapman's going to sing this. It'll be followed by a station jingle. Give us time to think. That revolution sounds exciting, but it isn't, because it's very difficult. You want to say something, Ruth?
Yes. The trouble I have with the idea of revolution is that, as you can see in almost every revolution, it takes a few steps forward, then it takes several steps back. The French Revolution followed the revolution of the monarchy, of the king, and it was several years until France really became a democracy. And when you look at the history of Germany, we've had our struggles with becoming a democracy. The first attempt failed miserably, the Weimar Republic, for a number of reasons, but it has been said that this was a democracy without democrats. And that ties in with what Brian just said, i.e. that it is really necessary for everyone to feel committed to democracy, to act and think as a democrat and to take over your duties. That was not the case in the German Republic established after the First World War, where many people were still married to the idea of monarchy, wanted to be governed, wanted a strong man, hadn't grasped the idea of democracy yet. So at the first difficulty, well, maybe the second or third, but when strain became too much, it caved in and gave rise to a horrible, brutal dictatorship which soon started a Second World War on the whole world. And only after that, and with the help of the Americans, did we get to our democratic feet in a way. But I think we all are still learning how to do this.
Okay, thank you, Ruth. Back to the jingle and talking about revolution. Yes, well, that's what I'll be talking about, revolution. And I was listening to the last part of Andy Peach's show, looking at the earth needs rebels. Yes, I think the earth does need rebels. And one of the things that seemed to be happening there was the change of technology is causing a revolution, which means that it may be that CMR will link up with 2 or 3 other stations, so we could create a bigger attraction around the world to give an alternative media news, I suppose, because often the media keeps certain things hidden, where we will be able to sort of dig out and find out the things that are not being said. Anyway, for democracy to work, every citizen has to take responsibility. Everyone needs to participate and exercise their rights of voting. They ought also to observe certain principles and rules to conduct a democracy or a democratic way of life. It's not anarchy where a free-for-all exists, because democracy still is about ordering life, but trying to give the fullest and best potential to every individual, equal of their gender, their color, their own ideologies. So we have to, in a democracy, it's a lot more difficult to try and keep everybody on board ship. You're nodding your head. Do you want to say something?
No, I agree.
Okay. Okay. And that came about after also listening to the recent victory of President Obama in the United States of America. And in his speech, this is part of what I took down from the script. Democracy in a nation of 300 million can be noisy and messy and complicated. Yes, we have our own opinions. Each of us has deeply held beliefs. And when we go through tough times, when we make big decisions, he's talking about the United States as a country, it necessarily stirs passions, stirs up controversy. And really that's what happens in a democracy. And leaders have to be really thick-skinned sometimes to take the punches and the criticisms that people throw at them. So things don't change, and things won't change for Barack Obama overnight or for America. There are so many arguments they have to go through. There are so many things they have to work out to deal with their liberty. Therefore, what I'm suggesting is that every citizen should respect the other person.
Yes, that seems one of the preconditions for any society to work and to live in peace. But let's come back to Aristotle, who obviously knew it all these many centuries ago, because he says, in all revolutions, the conditions which lead up to them is the desire for many, of the many for equality, and the desire of the minority for effective superiority. The practices with which they set out are profit, honor, or avoidance of loss or dishonor. The inciting occasions are many. Jealousy of those who have wealth and honor, official arrogance, fear of the law or its abuse, personal rivalry, failure of the middle class to maintain the balance, race antagonisms, antagonisms of localities, and others. That seems to make sense to me and describes very perfectly the state of the society we're in at the moment, because there is official arrogance. There is antagonism between social groups, etc. So it would seem that when people feel they are being neglected, unfairly treated, or being improvised in one way or another, they voice their protest through words. Or, if that doesn't get them anywhere, violent action to achieve their goal. It has been said that compared to dictatorships, oligarchies, monarchies, and aristocracies, in which the people have little or no say in who is elected and how the government is run, and democracy is often said to be the most challenging form of government. Democracy can be defined in many ways, according to our tastes and preferences. And that's a fact that has caused much disagreement among those leading various democracies as to how best to run a democracy. And a rather famous English statesman put it in his own way, and he may have had second thoughts about democracy and may have said to himself, democracy. So he came up with a witticism. Many forms of government have been tried and will be tried in this world of sin and woe. No one pretends that democracy is perfect or all-wise. Indeed, it has been said that democracy is the worst form of government, except for all those other forms that have been tried from time to time. You probably have guessed who it was, and if you haven't, it was Sir Winston Churchill, and he said it in the month of November, on the 11th of November, in 1947.
Well, there you are. Thank you, Ruth. Just to remind you, you're listening to the Changing Consciousness show on www.criticalmassradio.co.uk, which has a lot of views from many presenters, giving us different aspects of what democracy might be, because there are so many different ideologies around. And the Changing Consciousness show sets out basically to provoke thought and concepts whereby we can learn to create ways of living among and understanding others in partnership on a global level. Because the energy that emanates from our heart and mind in a kind of caring, loving way can be just as powerful, no, more powerful and transformative, providing for a better peaceful solution to revolution than aggression and war. We're going to have another station jingle and One Man's Dream. This is Yanni playing it on the piano and it's really beautiful. It breaks our thought with revolution to say that although revolution is necessary, we also need to keep a calm mind and be prepared to listen and understand. So let's listen to some music after we've listened to a statement from CMR.
CMR Critical Mass Radio is a completely non-profit station where the hosts pay to broadcast their shows. The mission of the station is to get as much information as possible out to people about the world we live in, to unite like-minded people, and to try to come up with workable solutions. If you agree with the work that we are doing, then please feel free to help us continue by making a donation on the webpage. CMR is for people who want answers, because now it is our turn.
Because talking about revolution, often the revolutions we've had have all been violent, so it always seems to be a violent upheaval. Abraham Lincoln once said, if the people are tired of the government they elected, they have the revolutionary right to tear it apart or throw it over. Very violent words, I think, and maybe that's how America sees revolution. I don't know. Following on from the French Revolution and their revolution as well, breaking away from the crown and the violence they've had in basically raping the land and the Indians as well, in order to create this new world. Anyway, let's not be judgmental on that. But most revolutions turn out to be violence. But I don't think nothing can ever justify using violence against any political opponent just because we disagree with them. Surely we should respect the rights of every individual and their dignity as human beings. Isn't that what democracy is supposed to be about? Do you want to say anything?
No, I can only agree with you. That is why it is so difficult to practice democracy, because it challenges the individual. If you want to be a Democrat, you can't just do it by going to the ballot box once in 4 years. You have to be democratic in your personal life too, which means your family life, I think, in the way you involve yourself in the community. You can't be a dictator at home and a Democrat just when you put down your cross once in 4 years.
Okay, well, revolution does not necessarily have to happen on a big scale. It happens all around us in different ways. It doesn't have to be organized political rallies with strong leadership seeking to overthrow another ideology, wanting to take over control. It doesn't have to be like that. Revolution can also be one of protest, standing up to any tyranny that confronts us, anyone who wants to deprive others, no matter what age, gender or status in life they happen to be. But, if you take a stand, that too is a turnaround and that too is a revolution. The thing is that takes courage, takes conviction to face up to someone who wants to hold power over you through threats of violence or even carrying out violence. So I'm suggesting revolution takes many shapes. The one example I'm going to give you here was on October the 9th, 212, when a young 15-year-old Bilala was shot in the head by a Taliban gunman. Why? Because she wanted to campaign against the destruction of girls' school in Pakistan. She believed that girls should be educated just as men, and she had the right to. In the face of terror, Bilala risked her life to speak out for the rights of girls everywhere. That too is revolution. But for me, in this case, it's non-violent revolution by a young, defenseless, but a very brave young woman. I wonder how many of us, when we talk about revolution, are prepared to actually stand up without arms. It's not easy. Just think, if one young girl can be brave enough to stand up for herself against frightening odds to seek change, how much more can be achieved if we unite using our voice in non-violent protest? Yes, even using CMR radio. This is a handy tool to voice our views. People may reject it, they may think it's not valid, but it provides a point of view. It might mean risking our life, but at least it does not mean us getting up on arms wanting to kill another, to get them to meet our demands. If that were the case, what's the point? Nothing changes in the 21st century. This is the year of change. This is supposed to be the year of Aquarius. This is supposed to be the year of peace. And if we are to follow that example, we actually have to become peaceful people ourselves, not revolutionaries with arms, but peaceful revolutions. We are taking up the arms of trust, of fair play, things that the world has lost contact with. It's lost contact with those items of friendship, of love, of care. Okay, I'm going to play two pieces of music now while we again do some thinking, because the whole point of this show is not only getting us ready, it's the last show on CMR for the Friday nights, and it's one which hopefully leads us into the weekend. It's a time of rest, hopefully. So rather than be angry and protesting, it's saying change confronts all of us. We have to learn how to handle that, and the way we do that is by helping one another. So this is preparing us to have a nice, restful, joyful weekend. And maybe one of the first ways we can start changing the world is learning how to smile. Well, that was two pieces of music there. The first was I Can See Clearly Now, Johnny Nash. And the second was My Heart Will Go On. It was a tune from Titanic, and that was piano and violin. So I hope you enjoyed that music. It gives us a nice little break, and I hope all of you in chat room are quite comfortable. And again, welcome world, if you've just joined us. You're listening to the Changing Consciousness show, which sets out to provoke thoughts and concepts whereby we can learn to create ways of living amongst others, talking and listening to others, trying to understand others as we seek to work in partnership on a global level for the benefit of every individual as best we can. and we've been looking at the theme of revolution. They've been mainly violent revolutions which have caused change, and change always comes when the majority of people are not happy with the way they're governed, or things are shared out. When we reach a point where a major change is about to take place, history shows us that in times such as these, there is confusion, there is distrust, there is conspiracy, and a search for strong leadership. It seems that human beings are always on the search for someone strong to lead them. And democracy is not about leadership as somebody leading us, but it's more to do, I believe, with each one of us participating. Rather than have one big leader, we are all leaders in a way, and if we're leaders, we also have to take responsibility. So there will always be some kind of debate about what does and what does not constitute a revolution, but there are many issues involved. Revolutionary and radical movements are sweeping the world today. Yes, so it looks like something is building up with the 2012 theory of the end of the world and the end of this and the end of that. Maybe we're coming towards the end of a systems of government which are trying to do away with dictatorship and going for democracy. And democracy is in its young stage still. We have to work it out. It hasn't been worked out. And maybe that's the revolution for the 21st century, is how do we do this without going back to the past? So we have had the Arab Spring, Occupy, action by students and youth, and strike waves have ushered around in a new era of resistance to dictatorship. In turn, this has sparked widespread debate on the nature of mass struggle, and here critical mass radio plays a small part in trying to look at some of the issues involved. Tonight our thoughts turn to revolution and ways to avoid violence in a democracy. To quote Thomas and Jefferson, every generation needs a revolution. Okay, so maybe that's part of human history, that change needs a catalyst, and maybe revolutions are that catalyst. Yes, but we have been more used to violent revolutions. But Gandhi showed us a different way, that in the greatest liberation and struggle that India had against British imperialism, his methodology of non-violence could also be liberating. And so India got its independence. But unfortunately, it also brought a lot of violence between Pakistan and India. So you may cure one ill, but there are so many other ills lying around within each one of us. And maybe what goes on inside, we put it on the stage outside, which is the world. So this kind of approach to peace comes with a cost, and that usually means being prepared to listen. You know, we haven't got many listeners in this world. We've got a lot of talkers and I'm doing a lot of talking too, I know. We have to try and understand the needs of others and make time to examine each other's motives. For me, this may be a better model of building peace in the 21st century. I'm going to give my voice a break, and I'm going to pass on to Ruth.
Well, the 21st century is really turning out to be a century where everything seems to change. And we set out to change things. Don't forget, we established democracy because people wanted a better life for themselves. People wanted better education. Politicians set out to provide better and free education for everybody, and now we've got it. Even though it's on the decline in some countries again, with what we've been about fees and everything. But that meant a complete change in society, because all of a sudden you had so many graduates of universities, graduates of grammar schools or comparative schools, and not enough jobs for them anymore. And those who were left behind didn't have any more jobs because, again, society evolves in this particular way. So the structures have changed. And if the structures are not in place, then people are not brought to the point of understanding that justice must be done, and if the have-nots outnumber the plentiful, then it makes for revolution and change. And I don't know what's going to happen in our society if the split, if the divide between the rich and the poor becomes any greater than it is today. It may lead to upheaval, where people are no longer willing to just suffer and be told to be grateful for what they have, for the little that they have. So who knows? Our democracy may be changing into something else tomorrow, and hopefully into something more peaceful and more just.
Well, that's one of my favourites. I do love Roy Orbison, bless his soul. I haven't read this book, but in A New Type of Revolution, Why It Kicks Off Everywhere, published by Verso Books, price $12.99, Paul Mason, editor of BBC Newsnight, he concludes in chapter 8 by this: I cannot help believing that in the revolutions of 2011, we've begun to see the human archetypes that will shape the 21st century. Maybe in many of the uprisings, we are beginning to see a new sociological type, the graduate with no future. We are increasingly producing more graduates from our education system who will end up with a degree only to be left on the dole without work or menial tasks, with a lot of pent-up energy. There is no doubt that unemployment and underemployed graduates have grown dramatically in numbers. And I think in some countries, the inability of capitalism to provide a future for any of them actually could destroy someone's will, purpose, and create a space there for revolutionary ideas. And maybe those are the kind of things that are taking place in North Africa and the Middle East, but also wanting to escape dictatorship, because one of the things education does do is show us that a lot of the systems which upheld the past were not creative to the whole population growth, but favored a few. Paul Mason believes that students and unemployed graduates played the key role in the struggles of recent years, comparing it with the theory of the 1960s, for example, by the Socialist Workers' Party also, that students could act as external detonators of revolution. The experience of the 1960s disproved that detonator theory. In France, 1968, the Magnificent Revolution movement, including the greatest general strike in history, began with students' protests. However, I don't know if Ruth can say anything on this, no amount of effort by German students in the same year to detonate revolution in their own country was able to move the working class. They were too far apart. There was no contact between the working class and the students. Do you want to say something?
Well, I can only confirm that, because in France it appears to have been a different story, where students and workers came together and took to the street together, but certainly not in Germany, at least not the places where I have been, or the news that I have seen in those days. It was very much a university kind of thing, and it did trickle down to the grammar schools. So we had in our town a general student council, school student council, for, what was then called the 68 Revolution. It was generally led by an offspring of the then socialist/communist party, but it was not a very fruitful thing, because all that happened was that people turned up with huge folders, and in their folders they had all the arguments of their parties for and against things, and there were no discussions. It was basically an exchange of political discussion, political viewpoints or standpoints, but no real debate. However, yes, it was not a revolution of several classes of people. It's very academic.
We're going to have a little break here, and also a break in the thought process, because the last time I went on the chat box, I think Paul said, has anyone played Andy last Christmas? And I've just seen it on here. So we're going to have a break in our thought process. We're looking at revolution, and then we're coming to a part where I'm looking at the church and how destructive the church has been. And if we're going to have a revolution, the church needs a revolution within it as well, in actually to come back to its roots. So here we're going to have some music. We're going to have a break, because Christmas is not all that far away. And I know going in the shops, you can already see the decorations up. So here you are. The Spirit must be moving with me tonight, because that song wasn't all that far removed from the program, because the next article we're talking about is the church. And Georg Zink, a German theologian, has written an article on the big task of the church, and maybe there needs to be a revolution within the church to help bring about a peaceful solution as we come up towards Christmas time, and the thought about peace on earth and goodwill to all people. Well, here is some of it. It was written in Deutsch, and Ruth has done some translating for me. So I'm going to read from it. Is it not the first time in 2,000 years that the official Christian churches speak of non-violence? Didn't they appear to be warmongers rather than angels of peace in the last 1,600 years? Who made war such a terrible thing? Who invented all the machinery that is used in today's wars? Was it not predominantly the Christian peoples? And then global justice. It was not the Chinese or the Indians who in the last 500 years sailed from shore to shore with their warships in order to take the riches of other peoples and bring them back home until the poorest of the poor peoples were completely dependent on them. Is the modern system of the world economy not predominantly a means invented by Christians to establish the worldwide rule of the rich? And how about caring for the earth? Who invented modern technical civilization? Who invented the energy devouring industries? Who is it that arrogantly takes center stage and claims that all other people have to do to adjust to this destructive way of life? The churches are well advised to proclaim their new creed loudly into the world, but they should not entertain the illusion that what they say has any credibility outside the Christian world. I'm speaking from within that circle, and yes, criticism hurts when it comes back to you because I'm part of that system. The task of the churches today has to be clear. The first one is end the age of wars. Show the meaning and power of non-violence and of an era where humanity can live together in peace on this earth. Otherwise, there can be no survival for humanity. We can't just keep killing people, because the more we multiply, the more people we kill. The second, end the age of social injustice and help establish justice between great and small, rich and poor, and to help the powerless to make a breakthrough. Otherwise, there can be no peace. No, how can we have peace if a third, 2/3 of the world starve while we in the West have plenty? How can we have a just world? And the third is end the age of exploitation and consummation of the force of the earth, and remind people to treat creation with care. Otherwise, the biosphere as we know it will not survive. That's harsh words. I don't know if there are any Christians around the world who are listening. And we need to take note. Nay, not any Christians, but all religious people, because often we are the most ideological people around, believing that we have the right to do this and that, and that we have the power of heaven and hell, being saved or not saved. So I think that when we can have religious tolerance, maybe we may have a more peaceful solution to war. Because look at the Middle East. All the Middle East flows around religion, wars. It's all intertwined with politics. Yes, it's very simple saying it like this. It takes a long time. When we have been brainwashed with ideology that to do this is a sin or to do that is a sin, we, instead of trying to say, well, if there's something wrong in us, something which we're not doing to work together with other people, we need to look at ourselves and maybe helped rather than condemned. Okay, we're going to have a break because I'm going to come back to a little bit more about that. And we're going to have another song from Les Miserables, I Dreamed a Dream, and this is Lee Slagona.
Quotations from a German theologian by the name of Jörg Zink. He's a prominent representative of the Protestant Church and a well-known philosopher. And he has his own ideas of how the Church would have to change in order to make a difference to the world today. Now, just recently, a new Archbishop of Canterbury has been appointed after much storm and strife, after several candidates were vetted, but obviously not found right for the job. And he seems to have been very astonished by having been chosen. He's a man, his name is Justin Welby, Bishop of Durham at the moment, who wasn't born and bred in the church. In fact, he used to work in the oil industry until he got his call. So he turned up in the office of his boss and said, "I'm sorry, I'm leaving." Paul said, "What on earth have you done?" He said, "You haven't done anything, but I think I have been called." So he upped and went, from a top executive job. But even then, he always had his own ideas about the world, the industry, the banks, the way we deal with money. And I'm just quoting from an article I found in The Guardian, where the writer says, "There are not many oil company executives who would say that the pay of many of our top executives in big 100 companies in the UK is outrageous and even obscene." Strong words. He also says that he's somebody who likes change, turned around his own diocese, and that may be just what not only the Church of England, but you can think of a few other churches who could need it as well, what the Church of England may need. The article then in The Guardian also says he carries the promise of being able to talk as if the Church of England doesn't matter very much. That may seem like an odd qualification to the Archbishop of Canterbury, but it may be the essential one today. The temptation for any archbishop is to suppose he is a terribly important figure. The job would expose him to continuous attacks, I suppose will, but would also constantly stroke and inflate his vanity, otherwise known as ego. The gap between pretension and reality is one into which far too many bishops and archbishops simply disappear. And not only them, I'm sure, there's lots of others, like politicians, who have disappeared in that very same gap. Must be very full down there.
Thank you, Ruth, for that. Anyway, we're coming to the last part of our show. And as we said, there needs to be great changes within the church. To accomplish these great tasks, it is necessary to end the age of struggle between denominations. It doesn't make sense. There may be many denominations in the future, but surely they should not struggle. No dogmatism between them. Otherwise, the church will have no credibility, and it's losing that credibility fast. So with the new Archbishop coming into place, and all the leaders, the Pope, and every Christian, every religious person, we need, as Christians, we're absolute beginners in this matter of peace. We talk about it, we talk about love, we talk about peace, but we are beginners because we don't contain that and we don't show that collectively. Not only are we not credible, we have not the knowledge and not the experience. After all, what do Christians know about the wisdom of non-violence? The only one who advised us to embrace it was Jesus Christ, and nobody listened to him in the past 1600 years. Do not the iron helmets of history cover our theological eyes? Buddhism, no doubt, has known more about non-violence for centuries than we Christians ever did. The same goes for Taoism and Hinduism. So it'll be good if we can take lessons from other people and other faiths. And then instead of talking about uniting Christians, let's unite the world in faith, because there are so many different people who believe that there's something else greater than ourselves. And let's listen to one another on that. And that's what the Changing Consciousness show sets out to provoke thoughts and concepts whereby we can learn to create ways of living amongst others, talking and listening to others, trying to understand others as we seek to work in partnership on a global level for the benefit of every individual as best we can. And look, there's no utopia here. We're never going to reach that because it's difficult to get 3 or 4 people to agree with one another and live peacefully. How much more difficult is that if you multiply that and make it millions? So we have to be reasonable in that we can never achieve a true democracy. There will always be tensions and we will always have to tweak and adjust. So rather than have revolutions to do that, we need to be able to make running adjustments as we go. Anyway, I've said enough for the night. I hope all of you have a good weekend. It's come to that time of the night where we are coming to the end of our show. And Ruth, you want to say good night?
Yes, indeed, we are coming to the end of our show, but, well, we personally are concerned we may not be coming to the end of the night yet, because we plan to go into town and scoop up what's left of the night of the arts and culture and see if we can grab the tail end of that.
And I'm going to take my baron with me and beat that little goat skin to the tune of German music hall or Irish tap, whatever is going, I join in. And so, yes, I think it may finish something like 2 o'clock in the morning. And we will see. So may the wind be on your back and the sunshine on your face. May your God or the force go with you, directing you. May you have a nice, peaceful and joyful weekend. And don't forget to smile and look on the bright side of life. I'm going to leave you with 2 bits of music as we depart, and that's going to be One More Day from Les Miserables and Ave Maria to conclude. So wishing you all the best, and people in chat room, thank you for being patient, staying there and listening. I haven't had a chance to see what you've been talking about, but before I actually sign off, I really want to say that if you are around in Manchester, there's the Critical Mass Conference on the 24th of this month. It's Saturday the 24th, 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. It's quite a long conference, so you don't have to stay for the whole lot. You can pop in and have a look. There's some good speakers on there. And the venue is in the Britannia Country House Hotel. And that's, if you want it's M20 2WG. Telephone number is 0871 222 0016. That's 0871 222 0016. And that's at the Britannia Country House Hotel. And that's on Saturday, the 24th of November, 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. You've got good speakers there, and the tickets are £10. So if you want to, please visit the CMR website, which is criticalmassradio.co.uk. That's www.criticalmassradio.co.uk. So try and get there. I'm afraid I'm not able to make that because I'm still in Germany, but otherwise I would have been there. So all of you in chat room, if any of you are involved in that, best wishes for that. And I'm going to now leave you with some music and saying thank you for listening and hope to be with you again next week.